This man right here is a hypocrite. So this is Carmen Berzatto, who's also known as Carmy or Bear or Chef, and he's from the acclaimed show The Bear. Played by Jeremy Allen White, Carmy is chaos in motion. If you haven't seen The Bear, it follows the acclaimed chef Carmy as he returns home to Chicago to take over his dead brother's restaurant. We meet the supporting characters Sydney, Richie, Tina, Ibra, Marcus, Sweeps, Manny, and Angel, all within the first episode. Now, yes, I lured you here with the semi-controversial title of calling this man a hypocrite, but once we get into this video, I think y'all will understand what I'm getting at. First and foremost, I have driven everyone I know to the brink of insanity with how much I talk about this show. Like, I saw The Bear about 2 weeks after it came out, and I was hooked immediately and rewatched the first season over and over until season 2 came out, and basically told everyone that I came into contact with to watch it. So, to everyone that clicked through my 4,756 stories about this show, hey, what's going on? Anyways, back on track. Because of that, I've had loads of time to pick apart the characters and try to get a better understanding of their motivations and who they are. So, let's get into it. So, this is a safe space, guys. I don't judge here, so let's be honest with each other. We've all been a bit hypocritical at one point or another. And most of the time, it's literally something that's like, OMG, don't tell anyone I said this, but I think Jessica's hair is ugly. And then you turn around and you tell your bestie, but then flip the situation and you tell someone not to share something, but then they tell their bestie. And you see what I'm getting at here? It's just mundane things that we don't even see as hypocritical until it happens to us. Anyway, so yeah, when I'm saying that Carmy's a hypocrite, I don't mean it in like he's an irredeemable villain who deserves the worst kind of way. I mean it in, why am I explaining this? This is literally what the whole video is about. Hold up, we'll just get to it. Okay, so when we come into season 1, we see that Carmy's trying to wrangle this place into something of a functional restaurant, but he's in over his head thinking that he can whip it into shape solely because he wills it. He's at odds with Michael's best friend Richie, and he has to gain the trust of these people who have long been employees of Michael while also adapting to an entirely different environment that he's not used to, though I would argue one that's equally as damaging as where he came from. And he screws up, like, a lot. The most glaring point of hypocrisy that we reach in the first season is episode 7, titled The Review. Before this episode, there had been a lot of little moments of Carmy being a hypocrite, but not quite to the scale of episode 7. So I'm going to give y'all a really condensed version of the lead up to this episode because you should go watch it yourself and experience the heinous levels of dread and anxiety that I did. But episodes 1 through 6 are essentially the characters getting to know each other more. Marcus becomes infatuated with making the perfect donut. Sydney becomes keen on having an updated menu complete with risotto. Richie's being Richie, and things were actually kind of looking up. And then we get here, episode 7, also known as The Great Downfall. So the crew decides to implement a new system of to-go orders, and it goes not well at all. The system starts bugging like crazy. Tina brings her nephew in because he got suspended from school. Sydney stabs Richie. Marcus makes the most perfect donut of all time, and it's basically like a case of Murphy's Law in that anything that could have went wrong. And it would be criminal for me to not mention that this entire episode is a one-shot, and it's absolutely glorious. Now, we would all be liars if we said that we would be able to keep our composure during a time like this, so I can't drag Carmy too much, but I can say that he completely shattered any lick of trust that he created within the span of like 10 minutes. He listened to Sydney's fears about being stuck back under the guise of a chef that would yell and be borderline abusive. Shoot, Carmy himself was a victim of his old chef's verbal and emotional abuse, but he ultimately resorted to similar tactics when faced with a dire situation. On one hand, it's like, duh, who wouldn't be pushed to the brink? But on the other hand, he became the very thing he was trying so hard to get away from. It's a clever parallel, I will say, but more so than that, I think that the chaos of all of that shook a part of Carmy that hadn't been rattled since he left New York. Call it a crack in the dam that led to this monologue in which Carmy says this.
As we got older, I realized I didn't know anything about him. Really. He stopped letting me into the restaurant a couple of years ago. He just cut me off cold. And that hurt, you know? And I think that flicked this switch in me where I was like, okay, fuck you, watch this. And because we had this connection through food, and he had made me feel so rejected and lame and shitty and uncool, I made this plan where I was gonna go work in all the best restaurants in the world. You know, like I'm gonna go work in real kitchens, like fuck mom and dad's piece of shit, right? And it sounds ridiculous, you know, me saying that now, but that's what I did.
And let me tell you, I love spite. I love a character that's just spiteful, whose sole motivator is I'm gonna do it simply because you say I can't. Just because it provides such a clear path to destruction. Because, okay, cool, you did what you thought your brother thought you couldn't do, but now what? Now that you're your own person, driven by passion and care for your profession and for the people around you, now what do you do? And at the end of season 1, we thought we kind of sort of answered that question, but it really just took us into season 2. So that was like a hyper condensed version of season 1 because Carmi's behavior kind of becomes a big problem in season 2, and I wanted to focus the most on it. So season 1 ends on a high note with the gang getting back together and Carmi and Sydney making plans for a new restaurant titled The Bear. We enter season 2 with that gut feeling of, okay, this could either be really good or really bad, and unsurprisingly, it's a perfect blend of both. We're introduced to Claire, Carmi's old crush from like middle or high school, and you know, that definitely goes the way it goes. They run into each other at a store, and initially he completely understands that having someone like her, a romantic potential in his life, would ruin the new mojo that he's fallen into. I mean, life is pretty good. His sister's on board with the restaurant, Cicero gives them the money, Sydney's 100% in, the crew has found a flow that works well, it's great. So he initially gives Claire a fake number, but she eventually gets his actual number, and from there, he's completely screwed. And because he's screwed, guess who else is? None other than his business partner, Sydney. As you might have recalled from episode 7 of season 1, Sydney has every right to never trust this man again, but she sees the potential of his vision, and not only that, she wants to be a part of it coming to fruition. And it looks like it'll go great, honestly, until Carmi loses focus when he decides to start a relationship with Claire. And I genuinely applaud his ambition. He thought that he was going to be able to strike a balance between these two worlds and truly believed that it would all work out, but that inner peace, that balance that he struck, came at a cost to those around him, most specifically Sydney. So starting in episode 3, we kind of see inklings that Carmi's not really going to carry his weight the way that he knew he was supposed to. He ditches Sydney in order to go help out Claire, and when he does decide to show back up, he's in the midst of entirely gutting the inside of what used to be the beef. Now, Sydney's understandably upset. I mean, she'd just been blown off and then came back to a demolition site, but Carmi, being Carmi, counters it with defensiveness. This situation is especially eyebrow-raising when only 2 episodes later, Carmi's out with Claire again, and comes back to Sydney, Nat, and Richie making major renovations, and this time, he's the one to get upset, and ironically enough says,
Why didn't you call me?
I should have called you.
We don't need to call you if everything is fine.
Everything's not fine!
Everything is fine!
which parallels Sydney's concerns earlier on when she says,
Did I call you to tell you that the walls are rotting and they need to be knocked down?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry. So just, for next time, what should I have done?
This just feels like obviously a really big decision, and it would have been nice to have been included in it.
Okay, got it. No. Next time the walls need to be knocked down. There's nothing we can do about it.
You let me know.
Now, the common factor here is Carmi being distracted, but the emphasis on time and focus in this season specifically makes his normal, completely mundane distractions feel so much more prominent. At this point, there's quite literally mere weeks left until the opening, so Carmi's lack of focus paired with his hypocrisy is jarring, for lack of a better word, especially when you think back to how he was functioning last season, both with Sydney's eagerness to look to the future and with Marcus's budding interest in the world of baking. And so no, it's not to say that Carmi being distracted by Claire was entirely bad. It was great for him, honestly, but it was terrible for everybody else around him. So take this scene in 208, for instance.
No, we don't need the spinach
I
anymore.
don't need the spinach anymore.
Well, I had a thought. If you could just, thank you. I had a thought on plating. I'll show you.
This looks kind of like a chaos menu.
Well, no, it's a thoughtful chaos menu. Look, Claire and I, we were talking about it last night, and she helped me realize that maybe I was clinging on to some things that, I don't know, maybe I don't care that much about anymore.
This is obviously a milestone in Carmy's development. I mean, he's in a good enough place to be drawing again like he used to, which is fantastic, but he's doing this all without Sydney, who is his partner. Now take this scene in 107.
Thank you.
So,
Ribbon of brine, huh?
well, I gave a dish to a customer because I didn't want it to go to waste. I obviously didn't know who
Chef,
he was.
It's all good, it's all good.
Okay, so, you know, it was an accident, and it's fine, right? Like, it's not weird or anything, like...
Good for business.
Right, yes,
Congrats.
exactly. And, yeah, I just want to...
tell your pops.
For sure, and I just want to make sure, you know, like, everything's okay. It's not weird or whatever.
It's okay, Sid. It's not weird, it's good.
I think there's a clear parallel here in A, how both of them are clearly being overeager and went about this in completely wrong ways. They should have consulted each other, but neither did, and it led to tension. And B, the lack of communication does nothing more than harbor resentment. I think this is another case of Carmy being so caught up in trying to figure out this balancing act that he quite literally starts to forget himself. And shoot, I'm saying I think, but I mean it's proven in the last episode, but we'll get to that in a minute. And about those moments of tension that I just mentioned, they happen multiple times between Sydney and Carmy, but there's a system that they establish in order to keep it from escalating too much.
No, I must have just given you the wrong count, it's fine.
Wait, do you need Rolade or something? Did I give you heartburn? Because that's
No, it's, I'm sorry. And sign, two of my old chefs used to do it. You know, if they were angry, fighting on the line, it helped. It was like their version of, let's talk about this later, you know? Didn't matter if one tore the other one apart. It always got them through service. It's good.
And let me tell you, I adored this system when it was first being implemented. I loved it. But at a certain point, Carmy began using it to calm down the situation rather than to solve a problem. And I like to call it a band-aid over a bullet wound because you could feel Sydney's frustrations building and building, and every time she brought up a legitimate concern, she'd be met with that. And okay, that was a little off track. It's not necessarily hypocrisy, but it was irritating me the whole season. But let's jump back into the final episode. So, the Bear is unofficially opening for Friends and Family Night, and long story short, Carmy gets locked in the walk-in. And you know, understandably, he freaks out. But the gag is, he put himself there. For weeks, he'd been forgetting to call the repairman for the fridge, and it ultimately came back to bite him. And this is what compelled me to make this video. For the entire season, Carmy tried to pull this balancing act off, and it all came crashing down in the span of like 20 minutes. It's karma for not being there. It's a cruel twist of fate for not being focused. It's unintentional hypocrisy because the one time he ensured his crew that he was going to be there, he couldn't be. And yeah, it weighs heavy on him. In fact, he acknowledged how poorly he'd been behaving.
Right? What the fuck was I thinking? Like I was gonna be in a relationship? I'm a fucking psycho. That's why I'm good at what I do. That's how I operate. I am the best because I didn't have any of this fucking bullshit, right? I could focus and I could concentrate and I had a routine and I had fucking cell reception.
And it's an obvious callback to earlier in the season in this monologue.
You know, maybe if I could provide more amusement or enjoyment for myself, it would be easier to provide for others, you know.
Now, we ended season 2 on an extremely bad note, at least for Carmy, but I actually love this for him. He shot himself in the foot 3 times over, once with neglecting his duties at the Bear, once again with Claire, and then once again with Richie. I didn't mention this earlier, but I do want to point out that Carmy yelling this at Richie...
Shit! You don't know fucking shit! Where were you when we fucking put your fucking brother in the ground, you selfish piece of shit!
You know what? You're obsessed with my
Fuck
family.
you.
That's what you are.
Yeah,
You fucking
I'm
leech.
obsessed with you.
You're a fucking
Yeah,
leech.
I'm obsessed.
After hearing Richie say this to him last season...
You're all I got, cuz.
is nothing short of wild, but Richie did hit him with something below the belt. But I mean, I was still holding my face like this the entire time Carmy was absolutely decimating him. Anyways, back on track. For someone like Carmy, a person that's been so deeply isolated and hidden within himself for years, I think the only way for him to grasp the magnitude of both being great at what you do while also being normal is to fail first, and his hypocrisy was a big part of that. Especially when you choose to strike up a relationship at quite literally the most inconvenient time possible. But another thing about Carmy is that he thought he had all of it 100% under control. Now, I don't know of anybody that was necessarily rooting for the romance, but I think it was necessary for his development. And Carmy had this internal breakthrough with, oh, I figured out a good bit of myself in season 1, and it let him walk into season 2 with a sense of false confidence. So he tried to settle into a sense of normal that was honestly just timed really poorly. Do I think that it was his intent to be a hypocrite quite literally throughout the entire season? No, I don't. Do I think that he was one? Well, yes, that's what this video is for. It's just, seeing Carmy do these things that he was telling people off for last season was very stress-inducing. But, again, I don't know what I expected by watching this show. So I want to be very, very crystal clear in saying that me calling Carmy a hypocrite is in no way, shape, or form me hating on the way that he was written. In fact, I love a good dysfunctional character who's trying to seek some normalcy but is so emotionally stunted and weighed down by family dysfunction that he doesn't know how to properly compartmentalize without neglecting some other major aspect of his life. I love it. But I just wanted to share my thoughts about how interesting it was to me that this is the route that they decided to go, because 2022 Amani would have never envisioned a version of Carmy that lets himself get distracted the way that he did. But it's interesting for his character, so I enjoyed it. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I'm saying that like I didn't just talk for 15 minutes, but please let me know your thoughts on my thoughts, or your thoughts on Carmy, or your thoughts on season 2 as a whole. I'm interested in quite literally anything. I could talk about this show for a day straight and still have more to say. So yeah, I have a video coming about Sydney soon because I really love her character, and I may or may not be making a video about 2 very similar characters with very similar arcs at some point in the future. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next go round. Bye.